Hi, everyone. Because I'm doing a legal brief due next Friday, I'm basically trying to rerun some videos that perhaps have gone under the radar and you haven't seen, and I've only done them once. And that is my discussion of John 10, verse 27 to 28, which is where Jesus says, "No one can be snatched from my hand," but we don't look at the conditions about what that is. So we're going to rerun that episode from June 2022. Only 193 people saw it, so we were a very small channel. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview. What we're going to do is focus on a top professor of Greek and at a Christian Protestant seminary, Professor Dell Moody, in his work, The Word of Truth, Grand Rapids Erzmans, 1981, at page 356, 357. And this is the book. You can find it yourself if you'd like to purchase it. And we explain all his credentials in the video. And this was his translation of John 10, 27 to 28. And he's correct because you have to use the continuous tenses where appropriate. And then he's explaining it, introducing it this way. Eternal life is the life of those who continue to follow Jesus. No one can retain eternal life who turns away from Jesus. John 10:20 is frequently used as a security blanket by those who ignore many of the New Testament warnings about going back or falling away, but a literal translation of John 10, verses 27 to 28, although the sentence hardly needs explanation, for it is a promise to those who continue to follow Jesus. Not for one moment do I doubt this. Literal translation. Quote, my sheep, this is his translation. My sheep keep on hearing my voice, and I keep on knowing them, and they keep on following me, and I keep on giving them eternal life, and they shall never perish, and no one shall snatch them out of my hand. So in other words, you still have a free will. That's what it's saying, because Jesus is saying it's a conditional statement. If you keep on hearing my voice and you keep on following me, then you won't be snatched from my hands. But if you decide you're not going to do that, you can be snatched from my hands. This is, again, a translation that we have not been provided, even though it's actually it's very routine, and yet it should have been done. So we'll go through that, and he'll explain this in more detail, and we'll go into that in the video. All right, so good. I wish you enjoy this video, and I'll just sign off here, and then it's the rest of the video, and it's a very short video. I think it's 15 minutes. All right, thanks. Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about what does Jesus teach on assurance, and this is from John 10:27 to 28, and we'll get some assistance from Professor Dale Moody in his book The Word of Truth, Grand Rapids, 1981. I just want to provide a little more background on the Professor Dale Moody. This is his book. It's called The Word of Truth, a summary of Christian doctrine based on biblical revelation. And it was published by William B. Erzmans Publishing, 1990, so it's a very mainstream publisher in Christian circles. And further, I want to detail some of his background. Professor Moody is an expert on Greek. He was once a pastor and became a professor of Christian theology at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, a position he held for over 40 years. He dissented from eternal security and bravely wrote books that contradicted this teaching by the head of the Baptists, Charles Stanley. As a result of his brave stand that caused conflicts with other Southern Baptists, this led to his early retirement in 1983. And you'll find this discussed at this webpage at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, Dale Moody, and down below you'll see his urging of Southern to change the abstract of principles and conflicts with the Southern Baptists on the issue of apostasy, which is what we're going to see is the issue here, led to his early retirement in 1983. So there's no dispute why he had to retire. It was an issue related to what we're going to be listening to today. So for Dale Moody, we'll see in this quote, anytime a person accepts Christ, begins following Christ, but then turns away from Christ, it has an apostasy, a New Testament version of apostasy. Okay, so here is where the discussion begins at page 356 of his book. And this is actually a screen capture from the book, so you can see how it was originally appeared in the book. So he says this: eternal life is the life of those who continue to follow Jesus. No one can retain eternal life who turns away from Jesus. John 10:28 is frequently used as a security blanket by those who ignore many of the New Testament warnings about going back or falling away. But a literal translation of John 10:27, all of the sentence, hardly needs explanation, for it is a promise to those who continue to follow Jesus. Okay, so that's his introduction to 1027, and we'll now read what he says from that point forward. And the next portion begins here. Not for one moment do I doubt this literal translation. My sheep keep on hearing my voice, and I keep on knowing them, and they keep on following me, and I keep on giving them eternal life, and they shall never perish, and no one shall snatch them out of my hand. That's his translation, literally. So I typed up those screen captures so we can focus on them. So the introduction he's saying is John 10:28, where we all remember that famous "you cannot be snatched from his hands." And if you just focus on that and you ignore what comes first, you ignore that there's a following Jesus that's necessary to continue and keep doing that in order to be in that position to not be snatched. So he's going to show you that focus on the end there is because we're not seeing the other portions of the passage clearly. So he's saying John 10:20 is frequently used as a security blanket by those who ignore many of the New Testament warnings about going back or falling away. But a literal translation of John 10:27-28, all of it, hardly needs explanation, for it is a promise of those who follow Jesus. So he's going to show you that it means you continue to follow him. That's the condition. So to go back, this is the typed up version, what we had before. My sheep keep on hearing my voice. So what kind of person cannot be snatched? Oh, someone who keeps on hearing my voice. And I keep knowing them, and they keep on following me. And so what kind of person cannot be snatched? The one who keeps on hearing, that's listening. The one who keeps on following Jesus. They cannot be snatched. So this is a very specific meaning about what salvation is where your assurance comes from. If you don't want to be snatched, you have to keep on listening to Jesus, and you have to keep on following Jesus, and he will keep on giving you eternal life. And so, if you remember, if you go back to John 17:1-3, Jesus defines eternal life as knowing the true God. That's actually the definition Jesus gave of the word eternal life. It's not, just some place you go when you die and you see God. It's to know God is eternal life. So as long as you keep on hearing and keep on following Jesus, you will keep on receiving eternal life, more knowledge of the Father, and then in that situation, no one shall snatch you out of Christ's hand. Now, he's going to now explain next what the reason is for this. So its source of these meanings is in the Greek. So this is what he says. Some read the passage as if it says, my sheep heard my voice, basically a past tense, and I knew them, and they followed me, past tense, and I gave to them eternal life. But the verbs are, in Greek, he's saying, present linear, indicating continuous action by the sheep and by the shepherd, not the punctiliar fallacy of the past tense, meaning not something that's a point in time in the past. So he's saying it's because it's in a present tense, we'll get into that in a second, that means you cannot read into it this idea that this, you only had to follow Jesus once, you only had to hear him once, and you're now, in the kingdom. You can never be snatched from Christ. And he's saying that's reading it incorrectly, and he actually calls it a fallacious way of reading the text. Now I want to show you, to make his point more clear, if you looked at a standard translation like John 10:27-29 in the NIV, you're just going to hear it in the simple present English tense. You're not going to hear it in the verb meaning in Greek, which is a continuous meaning. So listen to the difference. My sheep listen to my voice. Instead, it's truly keep on listening to my voice in Greek. I know them. In Greek, it truly means I keep on knowing them, and they follow me. Right? That could be something that happened for a period of time. It doesn't necessarily mean it continues. So present English doesn't have that grasp as on this idea of continuousness as it does in Greek. You'd have to say something like keep on in front of follow to give it the meaning it has in Greek. So he's saying in Greek it means truly they keep on following me. I give them eternal life, and it really truly means I keep on giving them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than I. No one can snatch them out of my Father's hand. So you see, it's very much contingent on knowing there's Greek meaning here that's not being translated, according to Professor Moody, as it should be. So with the help of Bible Hub, I've screen captured out what are the verbs here. So the verb for here is akousin, and it's the verb in the present indicative active, third person. So that's what Moody is saying. That tense, in this case, is referring to a continuous meaning of keep on listening. And then using Bible Hub again, we see the next verb, which is I know them, is gnosko. It's also present indicative active. Again, what he's telling you is this is a continuous tense. It has a meaning of continuation. Okay, and the next one is akalutheusin. Try to say that 3 times fast. They follow is present indicative active. And again, he's saying because it's in this tense, it should mean they keep on following me. Now I want to show you that the NIV is fully aware the correct translation can be or should be sometimes keeps on sinning, right? So here's where it's hamar tanai, and it's a present indicative active, and sometimes it's translated sins, but in fact it's traditionally translated sins in 1 John 3:6, but the NIV changed it to be no one who lives in him keeps on sinning. Okay, so that's a smart change because otherwise it would imply that no Christian can ever sin, and that's clearly not correct, and they know the tense provides for that meaning. And so that shows you even the NIV knows that the present indicative active correctly is continuous, and if the meaning in English of just a simple present doesn't contain that, like sins doesn't contain all the necessary meaning in John 10:27 to 28, you need to put that in so the person understands that it isn't just a one-time listening or following to Jesus that is involved. So, and here this is a one-time sin, you'll never sin even once, is what this verse says in most texts, and they changed it so you would not keep on doing that. You'd be trying to stop sin and not keep on sinning regularly. So that's the importance of the present indicative active and giving it its meaning when it could otherwise lead someone to think something incorrectly about the passage. So if we go back now to Dale Moody's translation of John 10:27 to 28, we can see what a difference it makes. So if you say, my sheep hear my voice, if you are not aware, that could make it sound like heard my voice. In your head, you might think it means heard, like one time. But that's not the intent of the passage, that you can just hear Jesus once, ignore him after that, and you're going to keep knowing about eternal life? No. So, and keep on following me is the second time this present indicative active appears as a contingency to being not snatched, and that is clearly, again, if you just read it as follows, and they follow me, as if it could happen only once, and they don't have to keep following, that would give an incorrect impression. In fact, if you just even think about the words hearing and following, you would understand it has to necessarily be continuous, because the implication of the verb itself, the meaning of these words are, hearing means you're listening, or you're paying attention, and follow. Someone who follows Jesus is someone who's going to keep on following Jesus. It's not intended to be a one-time thing. So just like sin had to be translated sinning in that prior passage we saw, these clearly have to be translated as hearing and following. And then you understand the contingency for your salvation is to just simply keep on listening to Jesus, keep on following Jesus, but it's not guaranteed by just simply having heard Jesus or followed him one time and had an experience initially. That's not how Jesus intends you to understand what gives you your assurance that you will not be snatched from his hands. So just it's a couple extra words, but they're meaningful extra words. Now, a good question arises from this. Does this mean Jesus wants constant following or practice of following him in order to be guaranteed you're going to heaven? That's not what he's saying. He's saying you have to keep on doing something, which means a persistent direction, a persistent practice. So we'll see also Jesus uses that very word praxis in Greek in Matthew 16:27. So let's listen to this. For the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he shall repay, sometimes it's translated as reward, but the word in Greek is repay, every man according to the practice, sometimes it's translated works, but it's the practice of each. So Jesus is going to repay everybody according to their practice. So where was your direction? Were you keeping on sinning? Were you keeping on not, were you listening? Did you keep on listening? Did you keep on following Jesus? This is the idea in Greek of the continuous tense. It's not that it doesn't have any pauses or breaks, but it's your direction and your practice. And so that's consistent with Matthew 16:27. And we'll also see that the word wasn't works, which is erga in Greek, but was the word praxis, which Mouncy translates as conduct, which is okay, but praxis directly is fine because it's directly translates into English by a word that is taken from that Greek word praxis, and it's our word practice. So Jesus will repay every man according to the praxis of each, or their conduct, if you will, but it's not material difference. But that is important to see again, that it's not a constant following or hearing. It's basically that your direction is to make a practice of following and listening to the words of Jesus. Now here's an important passage that says something similar to what Jesus is saying, John 10. This is 2 Peter 1:10. Wherefore, brethren, labor the more that by good works you may make sure your calling and election, and for doing these things you shall not sin at any time. So that basically says, do good works. By doing them, you'll make sure your calling and election. So that's how you can be sure you're going to heaven. If you have any doubts, just like Jesus said, if you want to be sure you won't be snatched, you have to listen and you have to follow. This is the same thing. And by doing these things, you shall not sin any time. So the idea is when you are occupying yourself, listening and following Jesus and doing good works as he instructs, this will keep you from sin because you're occupied with different things. Just a footnote here is that 2 Peter 1:10, the words good works are not in your KJV. And it's hard to understand why, but now with more recent scholarship, it should be corrected. We found it in all the earliest complete manuscripts in the New Testament that we have. The Aramaic Peshitta from the 200s, the Sinaiticus from 340, discovered in the 1800s, the Codex Bezae that was obtained prior to the King James Bible has it in both editions, and it's also in the Latin Vulgate from 405 AD, and it's also in the next major text, which is the Alexandrinus from the 400s. So every early text has this passage, and it's really an important one to use to remind us of where our security comes from. It's by listening to Jesus, following Jesus, doing what he said about good works. Then by doing these things you shall not sin any time, and you can have firm assurance that you will be in heaven when you pass from this life to the next. So the conclusion of our lesson today is keep on listening to and following Jesus. Make it your practice to do so, and do good works as he instructed us to do, and this will keep you from falling, for then no one can snatch you from Jesus' hands. So I hope this helped everybody. God bless. Take care. Ciao.